it was content, Your Honor. 2 million views. He got free exposure. $500 is more than enough for a few old bushes.
In Matthew 24, when the disciples asked Jesus for the ultimate sign of his coming and the end of the age, he pointed them to a highly specific, physical event. He spoke of the abomination of desolation, prophesied by Daniel, standing in the holy place. For this prophecy to be fulfilled, for a false Savior to stand in the temple and declare himself to be God, there is one absolute, unavoidable structural requirement. The temple must exist. For nearly 2,000 years, that seemed entirely impossible. The Second Temple was completely destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, leaving nothing but scattered stones and blood in the streets. Skeptics mocked the Bible for centuries. Even modern theologians spiritualized the text, claiming Jesus was speaking purely in metaphors. But God does not speak in empty metaphors when it comes to the final hour of human history. Look at the headlines you scroll past on your phone today. Look at the epicenter of global conflict in the Middle East. Right now, as you listen to this, the preparations for the Third Temple are no longer a fringe internet conspiracy theory. They are physical, funded, geopolitical realities. Priests are actively being trained in Jerusalem. The architectural blueprints are already drawn, and most chilling of all, the precise biblical requirements for the ancient purification rituals, the unblemished red heifers, have been secured, imported, and are being heavily guarded at this very moment. The physical stage for the darkest chapter in human history is being meticulously constructed right in front of our eyes. Yet, what is the modern church doing? The very people who hold the prophetic roadmap in their hands are completely fast asleep. Believers are fiercely arguing over petty political debates, chasing the next emotional worship high, and sitting through sermons about personal empowerment and financial prosperity. The world is literally building the stage for the Antichrist, and the bride of Christ is too busy scrolling through social media to even notice the sound of the hammers. We are witnessing the greatest prophetic convergence since the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but without the oil of the Holy Spirit, your eyes are completely blind to it. You look at the evening news and you just see politics. You look at the Middle East and you just see a territorial conflict. You are completely missing the massive, ancient spiritual machinery operating just beneath the surface of these events. But the physical preparation of the temple is only half of the terrifying equation. A stage is entirely useless without its lead actor, and Scripture gives us a chilling, deeply uncomfortable psychological profile of the man who will soon step into that holy place. A man who will not appear as a monster in the shadows, but as someone the exhausted world is already desperately crying out for. "Miss Vance," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet hum of the courtroom like a knife. "This is not a studio. Put that camera away right now, or my bailiff will confiscate it, and you will not get it back." She stopped walking, lowering the phone slightly, but kept the lens pointed in my general direction. "Oh, it's okay, Your Honor," she said, flashing a bright, heavily practiced smile. "My followers love behind-the-scenes content. I'm actually doing a live stream right now." I stared at her. The sheer audacity. "You are not doing a live stream in my courtroom, bailiff." My bailiff took 2 deliberate, heavy steps forward. Miss Vance's eyes widened, and she quickly shoved the phone into her designer handbag, waving her cameraman to the back of the room. She muttered something under her breath about how I was ruining her engagement metrics. She had absolutely no concept of where she was or the gravity of what she was facing. I turned my attention to Mr. Pendleton. "Arthur, please explain to the court why you are here today." Arthur cleared his throat. He spoke softly, with the measured cadence of a man who didn't want to make a fuss, but had been pushed entirely too far. He explained that he had spent the last 5 years cultivating a prize-winning rose garden in his front yard. It was a tribute to his late wife, Martha. Every single morning, Arthur was out there on his hands and knees in the dirt, pulling weeds, pruning, and tending to those flowers. It was his sanctuary. It was his pride and joy. On the afternoon of April 14th, Miss Vance and 3 of her friends decided that Arthur's garden was the perfect aesthetic backdrop for a viral prank video. They didn't just walk on his grass. They trampled straight through the rose bushes, spraying neon pink silly string everywhere, throwing plastic confetti, and doing internet dances on top of flowers that had taken years to grow. When Arthur came out of his house to beg them to stop, Miss Vance's crew shoved a camera in his face, filming his distressed reaction. They later posted it online with a laugh track and the caption, "Angry Boomer doesn't vibe with us." Arthur lost hundreds of dollars in property damage, but more importantly, he lost the peace of his own home. He handed a folder of photographs to my clerk. The pictures showed absolute destruction, broken stems, trampled petals, neon string clinging to the front porch. It was heartbreaking. It was thoughtless. I looked over at Chloe Vance while the photos were placed on my bench. She was inspecting her manicure. "Miss Vance," I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm, "did you destroy this man's property?" She rolled her eyes and let out a dramatic sigh. "It was just a prank, Judge. Honestly, he's being so dramatic. We were there for like 10 minutes. Plus, I tagged his neighborhood in the video. I literally gave him free exposure. Do you have any idea how much brands pay me for that kind of reach?" The gallery gasped. I didn't. I just stared at her, letting the absolute absurdity of what she had just said hang in the air. "Exposure?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. "You think you compensated for the destruction of a memorial garden with internet exposure?" "Miss Vance, let me make something abundantly clear to you. Arthur Pendleton cannot take your tags to the hardware store to buy new topsoil. He cannot use your reach to magically regrow roses that took 5 years of careful tending to cultivate. And he certainly cannot use your follower count to buy back the peace of mind you stole from him for a cheap laugh." She crossed her arms, shifting her weight defensively, clearly entirely unaccustomed to being spoken to like a normal human being who had done something wrong. "Well, my manager said this is just a minor civil matter and I can just write a check. It's really not a big deal. Honestly, I make more on one sponsored post than he probably made in 5 years at the post office." That was the moment the temperature in the room plummeted. My bailiff squared his shoulders, taking a half step forward. A woman sitting in the second row of the gallery covered her mouth. I looked over at Arthur. He didn't look angry. He looked diminished. He looked humiliated by a young woman who measured human worth entirely in dollar signs and view counts. And if there is one thing I will not tolerate in my courtroom, it is the deliberate, arrogant humiliation of a decent, hardworking human being. "We will get to your checkbook in a moment," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "But first, we are going to watch this prank of yours. Clerk, please play the video." The monitors mounted on the courtroom walls flickered to life. The footage started with loud, obnoxious electronic music. Chloe and her 3 friends were laughing hysterically as they jumped over Arthur's low white picket fence. The camera shook wildly as they deliberately stomped through the flower beds, spraying thick neon pink foam directly onto the delicate red and yellow rose bushes. Then, the video showed Arthur stepping out onto his front porch. He looked startled and genuinely distressed. He was holding a small gardening trowel, his hands shaking slightly, asking them politely to please leave his property. Instead of leaving, the camera zoomed in tightly on his face. Chloe jumped into the frame, posing next to a bewildered, upset older man, throwing up a peace sign and sticking her tongue out while her friends howled with laughter in the background. The caption flashed across the screen in bold, neon letters. I watched Arthur while the video played. He was looking down at his lap, his shoulders hunched. He was reliving the exact moment he was made to feel completely powerless in his own home. The video ended. The monitors went black. The silence in the courtroom was so absolute, you could hear the ticking of the clock on the back wall. I did not hit my gavel. I did not shout. I folded my hands together on the bench and looked directly at Chloe Vance. She was shifting her weight from one high heel to the other, checking her fingernails, completely insulated from the heavy, suffocating weight of what we had all just watched. "Miss Vance," I began, my voice deliberately low, "do you find that amusing? Do you watch yourself behaving like a thoughtless, destructive vandal and feel a sense of pride?" She scoffed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "It's not vandalism, Your Honor. It's content. You just don't understand how the internet works. My fans thought it was hilarious. We got like 2 million views in the first 24 hours. My manager said we didn't do anything permanently damaging, so I don't get why everyone is making such a massive deal out of some dirt and a few old bushes." "Some dirt and a few old bushes," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air so everyone could hear the profound emptiness behind them. "Let me tell you exactly what you don't get, Miss Vance. You do not get to trespass on private property. You do not get to humiliate a senior citizen who has worked his entire life for the things he owns. And you certainly do not get to stand in a court of law and dismiss the destruction of a memorial garden dedicated to a deceased wife as content." For the first time, Chloe looked slightly taken aback. "Memorial?" she muttered, glancing over at Arthur. "Nobody told us it was a memorial. We just thought it was a cute yard. Nobody had to tell you." I snapped, my patience finally reaching its absolute limit. Basic human decency dictates that you do not destroy what does not belong to you, regardless of whether it is a memorial or an empty lot. You walked onto this man's property with a camera and a profound sense of entitlement, believing that because you have an audience on a telephone, the rules of civilized society no longer apply to you. Her cameraman in the back row shifted uncomfortably. Chloe's face flushed red, but not from shame, from indignation. "Look," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "My manager already offered him $500 to drop it. That more than covers some silly string and a few broken stems. He's just dragging this out because he wants his 15 minutes of fame by suing a celebrity." 15 minutes of fame? I repeated, letting the profound arrogance of that statement echo in the silent courtroom. Miss Vance, Arthur Pendleton, spent 40 years serving his community. He has lived in that house for 4 decades. He does not need, nor does he want, your particular brand of fame. What he wants is his dignity, and he wants his front yard back. Arthur looked up from his hands, his voice trembling just a fraction, but his eyes were steady. "I didn't want their $500, Your Honor. When her manager shoved that check in my face on my front porch, I told him I just wanted them to clean up the mess. I told them to please wash the chemicals off Martha's roses before they seeped into the roots. Do you know what she did?" He pointed a weathered finger at Chloe. "She pulled her phone back out, filmed me crying, and called me a Karen." Chloe rolled her eyes again, crossing her arms defensively. "Oh my God, it was a joke. That's just internet culture. You're taking it completely out of context, Judge. We were just creating a narrative." Suddenly, a man in the first row of the gallery stood up. He was wearing a tight, trendy suit with no tie and holding a clipboard. "Judge, if I may, I'm Chad, Coco's talent manager. We've tried to be extremely accommodating here. We even offered to do a collaboration video with him." "Stop right there," I snapped, pointing my pen directly at him. "Are you a licensed attorney in this state?" "Well, no, Your Honor, but I represent—" "You represent absolutely nothing in this room," I interrupted, my voice cracking like a whip. "You are not a party to this lawsuit, and you are not legal counsel. You are a spectator. If you speak one more word without being directly addressed by me, you will spend the rest of this afternoon sitting in a holding cell. Do we understand each other, Chad?" Chad swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. He nodded quickly and dropped back into his seat. The smugness vanished instantly. That was the second crack in their armor. I turned my attention back to the defendant. "Now, Miss Vance, since your manager is no longer speaking for you, let's talk about this silly string and these few broken stems. I have a sworn estimate here from a licensed horticulturist and landscaping company. I held up a detailed 2-page invoice. The neon foam you sprayed all over his yard is highly toxic to plant life. Because you refused to clean it up and left it there to bake in the afternoon sun while you sat in your car editing your video, the chemicals seeped directly into the root systems." I paused, making sure she was looking at me, making sure she couldn't look anywhere else. 4 of those mature rose bushes are dead, Miss Vance. You didn't just trample them, you poisoned them. Poisoned. The word hung heavy in the air. For the very first time since she strutted through my doors, Chloe Vance actually looked at the photographs of Arthur's ruined garden. The reality of the situation was finally, slowly, piercing the thick, insulated bubble of her social media echo chamber. "I didn't know," she stammered. Her voice had completely lost that practiced, arrogant vocal fry. "We just bought it at a party store. I didn't know it would kill them." "Ignorance is not a defense in my courtroom, Miss Vance," I said, leaning forward. "When you invade someone else's property for your own personal profit, you assume the liability for whatever destruction you leave in your wake. The invoice to remove the contaminated soil, replace the 4 mature rose bushes, and restore the garden to its previous state is $4,250. In the gallery, Chad, the manager, practically leaped out of his seat again. "Judge, we will write a check right now. $5,000. Keep the change. We just need to wrap this up. Coco has a sponsored brand trip to Cabo tonight and a flight to catch." I slammed my hand flat against the heavy wood of my bench. The loud smack made both Chloe and Chad flinch physically. "I told you to be quiet," I directed at Chad, my voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. "This is a court of law, not a drive-through window. Justice does not operate on your brand trip schedule. You do not get to throw money at a problem to make it disappear before the lesson has actually been learned." I turned my intense focus back to the young woman standing at the defendant's table. She was no longer inspecting her manicure. She was looking at me, and for the first time, The untouchable influencer facade was entirely gone. She looked exactly like what she was, a scared, out-of-her-depth 22-year-old who had never been told no by anyone in her inner circle. "Miss Vance," I said, lowering my voice to a calm, steady timbre so the courtroom had to stay perfectly silent to hear. "You have built an entire career on getting millions of people to look at you. Today, I am going to make you look at yourself. I am finding for the plaintiff, Mr. Pendleton, in the full amount of $4,250 for the property damage. But we are absolutely not stopping there." Chloe's eyes darted frantically to her manager, but he was frozen in his seat, terrified to speak. "You are going to pay that restitution amount within 48 hours. Furthermore, because your actions demonstrated a profound, disturbing disrespect for the hard work of others, you will complete 100 hours of community service. And let me be perfectly clear with you. You will not be doing it at some trendy, catered charity gala. You will complete your 100 hours of community service with the City Parks and Recreation Department," I instructed, my voice ringing clearly across the room. "You will be assigned directly to the municipal landscaping and maintenance crew. You will wear a heavy canvas uniform. You will pull weeds, you will haul bags of heavy mulch, and you will get your hands dirty. Real dirt, Miss Vance. The exact kind of dirt Mr. Pendleton has been kneeling in for 5 years." Chloe stared at me, her mouth slightly open. The reality of actual physical labor, unfiltered and unglamorous, was completely foreign to her. "And let me make the conditions of this service crystal clear," I continued, leaning over the bench so she could not look away. "There will be no ring lights, no cameramen following you around, no vlogging your supposed journey of personal growth for internet sympathy. Your phone will remain locked in your vehicle. If the municipal site supervisor reports even one single instance of you treating this court-ordered consequence like a photo opportunity, your 100 hours will immediately double to 200, and I will see you back in this courtroom on a contempt charge. Is that understood?" She swallowed hard, nodding weakly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Furthermore," I said, "you bragged to this court that you received 2 million views while making a mockery of a senior citizen's property. I am ordering you to post a formal, written apology to Arthur Pendleton on every single platform where that video was published. No dancing, no background music, no shifting the blame to a misunderstanding. Just a clear, unequivocal admission that your behavior was cruel, thoughtless, and destructive." I turned my gaze to the manager, Chad, who was still sitting frozen in the gallery. "As for your brand trip to Cabo, Mr. Manager, you had better get on the phone with your sponsors right now. Miss Vance will not be leaving this state until her restitution check clears the bank, and her first 20 hours of manual labor are logged and verified by this court." I then looked over at Arthur. The weariness in his eyes had not entirely vanished, but his posture had changed. He was sitting up straighter. He looked like a man who had finally been heard. "Mr. Pendleton," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, "I am so deeply sorry for the disrespect you suffered at your own home. The money will restore the soil, but I know it does not replace the time, the love, and the quiet peace you spent nurturing those plants for your Martha. You deserved far better from this young woman, and you deserved far better from the people who stood by and laughed." Arthur nodded slowly. A small, tight smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said quietly. Not a victory shout, just the profound relief of a man who had his dignity restored. I struck my gavel. "We are adjourned." Chloe Vance did not strut out of my courtroom. The high heels didn't click with the same arrogant, practiced rhythm. She walked out quickly, her head bowed, while her manager Chad trailed behind her, frantically whispering into his cell phone, desperately trying to do damage control for a luxury trip that was now officially canceled. 3 months later, my clerk brought a file into my chambers. It contained a final report from the municipal landscaping supervisor. He noted that on her first day, Miss Vance had shown up in pristine designer activewear and complained bitterly about the heat. But by week 3, hauling heavy bags of mulch and pulling weeds under the blistering summer sun, something shifted. The report stated that she worked quietly. She stopped complaining, and most importantly, she left her phone locked in her car, exactly as ordered. Included in the file was a transcript of her apology video. It was exactly as I had mandated. No background music, no ring light, no defensive excuses, just a stripped-down, deeply uncomfortable admission to 3 million followers that she had behaved terribly, that content is never an excuse for cruelty, and that she owed Arthur Pendleton a profound public apology. Late in the afternoon, When the courtroom is empty and the lights are humming quietly, I sit at this bench and I think about how much the world is changing. The technology gets faster, the cameras get smaller, and the desperate hunger for attention gets louder. But the core of who we are as human beings does not change. Respect is not a metric you can track on a screen. Decency cannot be monetized, and empathy cannot be manufactured for a viral video. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that the internet does not give anyone a free pass to leave their humanity at the door, then hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder. Remind the people in your life that no amount of views, no follower count, and no brand deal will ever be worth more than your character. My name is Judge Judith Sheindlin, and in this room, the only influence that matters is the truth.